Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the SKT Pro Series, the Pro Tier specifically. Apologies for the late join to you all today. Had a little bit of, we'll call it technical hiccups, but apologies as always. My name is Ben Sapsford. Tonight I'll be your guide, and tonight we have got some pretty interesting racing indeed. Of course, we're coming to the end of the season at this stage. The Pro Tier is coming to a bit of a dramatic conclusion, and you join us today with Monza, of course, the Temple of Speed and the track that everyone is going to be pushing to its absolute limits. Oh, looks like having a couple of control issues. Can only apologize for that. But we have a lot to look forward to. We've got some all-star drivers. We've got all of the teams really trying to bring their A-game out tonight. And we've got ourselves a heck of a lineup, which will waste no time in taking you through in just. If you do enjoy and have liked the season so far, of course, and you want to stay on top of it all, make sure that you are followed, subbed to all of the good stuff so you can keep up with all of the action, and also make sure to check us out on our social medias. We have got, of course, the final run of qualifiers, but it looks like DLT is the team to beat, as we have Fabrizio Donoso. We've been on board with good little moment. Adam Reztek, of course, bringing their best 17.0 coming out, say, piloting in the Alpines. And then you've got a mix. You've got AMR, FCT, Venturi, Esports making a bit of an appearance in 6th and 11th with Beisner and Wiedler. And a few other drivers from a few different teams hoping to jump into those low 17s. I'd say we're aiming for a 17-1 all in all. That's really the golden ticket. 17-1 with this company of drivers should put you around the mid-pack, if anything go by. But we have seen the times drop in races and qualifyings before, so I wouldn't be surprised if tonight is no different. Everyone getting themselves into the hits. And we have Lucas in P19 for FER Campeonato, who has not set a time. Pascal Gill also out of the session for Anubi Esports. Bit of a concern there, a little bit of a worry, but we will have to, of course, see how that one plays out. Drivers go. They are relatively set. I think, in a way, this is one of those tracks where it's better to be out of the scope of the initial fight. Those opening laps can be especially treacherous. You're looking at turn 1 and 2, that opening chicane. The history is there for a reason. So while you do want a strong qualifying time, it can sometimes still be viable if you get, say, P3 or P4, as long as you're in the thick of that fight, and you come out the other side, saying into Sector 2. So, drivers now making their way out onto the field. Ryan Camporsi for FCT is going to be the first out, and is going to be setting the pace. Although, that being said, going around the outside, trying to get a bit of a jump, and trying to get a bit of space, it looks like that is Tom Wolfgram from ET8, who is making a bit of a push to try and create an opening. Of course, traffic is a concern when you have everyone flying out at the exact same time. It can be treacherous. Can be very difficult to manage. And we are going to see the drivers now try and push their cars to the very limits. Monza, only real things to be looking out for is some of those chicanes. For one, we have Ascardi right there. We've seen drivers invalidate time and time again. And, of course, Parabolica, where the stewards are extremely stringent on when it comes to track. There is no such thing as extension at that sector of the circuit. You'll see drivers, in fact, trying to intentionally go narrow on Parabolica, close the distance, and narrow up that sector of the track. But let's stick on board with Wolfgram, as he is the first of the final lappers. Heavy into the first corners as they jump in all the way down from 8th gear to 2nd. Using a little bit of that engine braking to tactical advantage there. The thing is, as long as he can keep the car in control while he goes through that. Smoothly does it here. Second chicane. Now you can see almost kicking the car in. Letting the tail catch up in some cases. You can have a little bit of a snap when you try and steer the cars in. Handling model of this game, of course, rewarding a little bit of that snap steer. It's not quite day one where you had some, shall we say, interesting quirks of the handling model. But now that we are here, your handling model being a little bit more refined. And of course, drivers and teams alike, I'm sure, look into the future now as one of the oft speculated future paths for this game is, of course, the F1 26 DLC. We haven't really had much news about that. I'm sure that the drivers and teams are eagerly anticipating the next stage of league racing. But coming up to the line, Wolfgram with a very clean run gets a .187. That's enough for the second row, but how is that going to fare relative to the competition? You've got Venturi, for example, Vidler and Beisner both on laps. We have Raminguez and Camporsi in 4th and 3rd. No major improvements there. We have AMR going millisecond for millisecond. In fact, extremely impressive running there from the both of them, managing to get such close proximity out their laps. Donoso comes through with a .005 and a .075 for Noah Raza for FCT. Now is the second Tatum Restech driver going to come through as we see more of the field start to cross over the line. So a couple drivers getting knocked down, a few pegs. Tekibi in P10, just getting knocked down to P11 as Gio Baroni is going to go down a couple of spots. Widler into P3 with a .118. How is Claudio Diaz going to get? It's going to be no improvement here for the second TRT driver. And the last few races coming through to make it home. Scott Holmes last two cross the line, no improvement. So, coming out of qualifying, top dog, it's going to be Fab. Beautiful run. And I think the name says it all. Closest to breaking that ceiling and a very sharp quali. 7/100ths of a second, split himself and Noah Raza in the front row with Vidla and Diaz in row 2. Then you've got Camporsi and Raminguez in row 3, Rolero and Beisner in row 4, and row 5 complete your top 10. It's Wolfgram and Baroni. Following 10, you can see is Robotam, Tekibi, Casper, Moya, Lucas, Marco, Holmes, Miles, Kamensky, and Pascal Gill, who unfortunately, did not set a time coming out of this session. So a little bit disappointing to see, but it is ultimately the way of things. Apologies, I don't have a camera because I'm in the middle of moving. I have pretty much my desk and then a barren room behind me, so hardly an interesting backdrop. All my kit is packed away for that regard. So I appreciate everyone's patience with me jumping in last minute. And we will see what the racers have to show for. I personally can't wait. It's been a little while since I've been in the seat for the Pro Series, the Pro Tier, and we've had quite a season. Of course, the standings coming out of Spain, it is going to be quite a stack. So, individual drivers, you have a lot of rotation in and out, but Fancelto, the 103 points for TRT, is currently the driver to beat. And by quite a margin, he's got a lot of mileage, as the next closest are the two AMR drivers, Alejandro Herrero and Aaron Raminguez. If I get any of these names wrong in terms of pronunciation, I do apologise as well. 226 points for TRT, with AMR in a close second at 176. And 168 points for Venturi Esports. Tomasenga Sim Racing in P4 with 157, and then quite a large gap lower than that. You have RSC, ET8, both on 38 points. 34 points for Onibi Esports, FST in 31-point trim in P8, FVR Campeonato with 15 points in P9, and then FCT with 10 points in the bottom spot in P10. In a way, it's a tale of two championships going into these final 3 rounds, as you have a distinct, almost 2-tier course. You have the top 4 of TRT, AMR, Venturi, and Tomasenga Sim Racing, with a fairly spread margin of points between P1 and P2, but the rest of the drivers are fairly close. Then it's almost 120 point gap between Tomasenga Sim Racing and RSC. But that, in a way, makes for an interesting, almost say, second fight within this championship. So we have ourselves quite a show. We're going to take a small intermission before we get ourselves on track, but be sure to join us in just a couple of minutes because we have got ourselves a heck of a race to look forward to. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the patience as always. So, we are in a moment about to go trackside. The drivers are scheduled to be readying up and on the course at any moment now. So, I am firmly keeping my eyes on the likes of Donoso. Of course, with an extremely strong qualifying performance, even if the gap closed by the end of the session, it was still a heck of a statement from intent by the time we got trackside and joined. He was well ahead in the qualifying standings, and that much may continue to hold true, as the field has quite a set of competition, and I'm, for one, very eager to see how it. We are just waiting on the full confirmation here and getting all of the drivers readying up. We see a little bit of chatter from the field as questions are being raised. We were, for full context, we're meant to go trackside about 2 minutes ago, and we are just getting a little bit of confusion from the drivers in regards to what exactly is going on and when we are going to actually meet ourselves on the asphalt. So, I think for the likes of AMR, Venturi, Tomasenga Sim Racing, I think this is a make or break round. With this gap between P1 and P2, it's all a question of who can bring their best. The Temple of Speed, 5 red lights are dawning. The track is hot, and away we go for the first. And a major run here into turn 1. And Donoso is already hard on the defensive. You can see he sweeps briefly to the inside before dicking back out again. Uwidla with a little bit of competition against Noah Raza. The two go side by side. The other Venturi driver, Abaisner, kicking the rear out as he goes out of turn 2. A little bit of side-by-side combat as well from Baroni. And then you have ET8 trying to get a couple of early places while everyone is conjoined. Claudio Diaz, you can see, briefly poking the nose out, looking at an opportunity into the second chicane. One that ultimately did not surface. He goes very deep, though. Look at him in Noah Raza going wheel-to-wheel jousting through Lesmo 1, now Lesmo 2. He manages to get himself ahead. He's going very aggressive with his ultimate strategy here. And on the medium compounder tyres, like the two leaders ahead of him, he needs to get the jump on those on the white walls. The hards, they're going to take a little bit longer, but they're not going to have that get up and go. He needs to use them while they're in the prime window. Needs to see that jump forward, and same is true for Beisner, although he's not exactly in a privileged position, given he's half a second away from Raminguez. The two AMR drivers, I bet, are going to be working together to try and sort of coordinate with each other, control the track, play the field to their advantage. Denoso getting, of course, the fastest opening lap, but it's eyes on the mid-pack as well, as Baroni is going to be front row in the center seat of a major squabble at the mid-pack. You can even see towards the back end of things, I think that was Zach Miles going for a bit of a peek around, or maybe that was Marco Eve, goes for a dive and gets the move on Scott Holmes for FER. So Baroni was very close and almost tempted, it seems, by a move on Camposi for FCT. There is Casper, Thomas Senga Sim Racing peeking to the left there, ultimately choosing to dip back behind, I think choosing peace at the end of it all, and Marco along with Wolfgram coming out of the pits, to say Marco and Pascal Gill are the ones fighting. So we have Wolfgram with a bit of an interesting turn of events, shall we say. He has gone on to a fresh set of hard tyres, so not sure what the game plan is. We'll have to wait and find out. The opening changes. Denis Kamensky, very strong opener, 5 positions up on his starting, so jumping from P19 to P14 now. That is a heck of a run. Alejandro Lorero as well from AMR, worth mentioning, given his jump up. Leapfrogging his teammate as well as giving a bit of trouble to the FCT and Venturi drivers around him. Ronebi, Thomas Robotham, just behind Gio Baroni, briefly making that peak, as we see many do at this section of the track. Here is Gabriel Moya going over the curbs. A little bit aggressive a run there into turn 1, trying to squeeze the space out from the two test drivers, but Kasper and Kamensky both not having any of it. In fact, Kamensky weaponizing that poor exit out of turn 2 in the recovery to try and get the move into the chicane. They bump a little bit wheel-to-wheel just ahead. I think that was Robotham and Baroni, but even then, we have Kamensky joining up with his teammate and making a very slick move indeed. With the teammates reunited, now they can see about moving up the grid together, coordinating. You can use that strategic element to best effect. What's he on the back of Beisner? For them, of course, got the DRS. They are in the train, and everyone, barring Wolfgram, is within a second of each other. So now becomes who can leverage their position the best. 27 laps here at Monza, so we'll have to wait and see how it all plays out. Looking a little bit grey in the skies above. A little bit of grass getting picked up for Ryan. So if he's going to tee himself up for a move, Beisner is anticipating so. He peels to the inside and then varies his line ever so slightly, trying to keep Camposi out of his slipstream, minimize the advantage available, but that's not going to stop him for going for it. He goes down into turn 1, the side-by-side, all the way through turn 2, no contact made, beautiful spacing and great driving from them both here. A little bit of a squeeze coming from Beisner there, as you can feel he's under pressure, and currently Ryan has the advantage. Question is, who's going to hold it into the chicane? There is going to be a run there from Camposi into P7, and is well executed at that. Robotham going for an attack with Gio Baroni as well, ultimately having to dip out on that second chicane, not able to hold all the way. I think just being a little bit out of room there, and a bit out of sorts on the exit. So the pressure is on. We are lap 4 now, heading into lap 5. Looking at the leaders, though, they have stayed relatively consistent. Denoso, Voedla, Diaz, the top 3 have all stayed around the half a second mark. So the field is starting to space a little bit. We still have some major fights a little bit further down. Eyes on Thomas Enger Sim Racing. You see that is Casper looking down the side of Tekubi, and also Robotham in Onibi. Looking for a chance. Seeing where he can get his car. There is the defensive from the Haas. All the way to the inside, trying to hold that apex no matter what. A little bit later on the brakes there. Casper's going to be forced to go alongside. Little tap on the rear quarter there. That tyre going into the front wing. Holds his nerve though. No catastrophes to speak of. Always a little bit risky when you go into a corner like that. When you go to the inside especially, because you're relying on the awareness of your opponent. And if you get significantly alongside, they close the door. That's when tears start falling. Because that is easily an incident that can be avoided in a lot of cases. Do spot a bit of danger as Loureiro is teetering on the edge of the 1 second barrier, and this could be catastrophic if not handled quickly by the AMR driver. That strategic domino effect is going to have heavy consequences. But it looks like Loureiro has taken it to heart. He's already pushed back into the 6/10 range. Managing to recover that situation nice and effectively. Here is Lucas on FVR on the back of Gabriel Moya. The 8 driver on the defensive, seeing where he can get away with this one. He's maxing out here, really pushing the car as hard as it can go here. Lucas tucked in very neatly to the slipstream of Moya there, all going in, and oh, he's a little bit close. Bump on the rear and bump on the sides. Nowhere to really go, boxed in by his situation. Too late on the brakes there, put him in a bit of a predicament. Contact made once again between himself and Moya as they come out of turn 2 and into Cabo Grande. A little bit too risky of a run there. Ultimately, it has paid off though, as we see Lucas and Scott both making an advance, jumping past Moya, placing him 2 positions down. In fact, 3 positions, as Zach Miles has capitalized on the misfortune of the ET8 driver. Fully capitalized on the situation. I've got to say, smart move from Zach Miles and FST. You see how it's playing out. You see an opportunity to jump for a little bit of gain. You got to take it. In company this fierce, you have to take those chances. There is no room for hesitation, for skepticism. It's got to be all go. 5 laps in. Coming on to lap 7, in fact. And the drivers are looking fairly well placed. Medium tyres are going to start to come out of that peak window by this point. So while they still hold significant pace, in the same way that we see the exaggerated effect coming out of the softs, they are not going to be holding as much of an advantage for the hard compound anymore. This is why we say that time is of the essence when it comes to the medium runners. Robotam going for an attack on Gio Baroni. And a smooth execute through the chicane. No notes. In the outside run, the speed, and making sure that there was no casualties to speak of. Baroni displaced down to P10. You're right. Interestingly, Wolfgram has actually made up quite a bit of time in his hard tyres. Since coming out of the pits very early, he will still have to match the cadence of the others because he jumped in on lap 1. But he has made up quite a bit of time. So genuine credit where deserved, despite the position he's in. He's actually made some progress. Always a positive sight. Ryan coming through to hopefully make an attack on the AMR, where the AMR twins, the AMR pair, I managed to mix 2 words at the same time. The AMR drivers either way are going to be holding firm in P5 and P6. In a way, it's the ideal position for them to be in. The only problem I foresee is making the call of who's going to jump into the pits first. They're on an identical strategy. They're going to be on identical wear for the most part. Minor deviations in driving style notwithstanding. The same light. Too much complacency will bring someone like Beisner into the mix. Still on those mediums, keep in mind, and they may not be in their perfect prime, but they are no slouch either. Not like you're hemorrhaging time relative to the hard still. Plenty of life in them yet. Looking fast and looking slow is smooth, smooth is fast. Is that the saying? I hope so. We'll make it that way. Dave Riddler is really holding ground well. He's surrounded either side by Tatum Restec drivers. Oso and Diaz are not drivers you'd necessarily want to trifle with. They're very strong, as we saw out of qualifying. Riddler with a very strong performance likewise, responding in kind and holding a perfect position. But with the teammates either side of him, he has to make a choice. Does he go aggressive, trying to catch up to Denoso at risk of mistake? Does he go more defensive to protect his P2? Or does he hang back in the middle? Just focus on keeping time, not going too far into either driver's individual space, and just let the flow of the race take him. All viable options will have costs. Those kind of strategic decisions that either the drivers or the engineers underpinning them have to juggle, sometimes make split-second decisions on. For example, if the leader decides to head into the pits, you've got to make a decision within a couple of seconds. You're going to follow, or where you're going to stay out. Pit strategies predefined, but you sometimes have those situations. You lose the pack, you lose the DRS. You lose the DRS, you lose major time fast. You have Marco, who has now at this point gone in for a stop. He has gone into fresh hards, making a bit of a jump there and going behind Tom Wolfgram by about 7 seconds. Tekibi going to be doing the same. The RSC drivers pitting very early by my count. What's the play here? What's the game? They're trying to get onto the hard tyres as soon as physically possible. Try and undercut the field. Let's wait and see. Jasper getting undertaken by Lucas for P12 before heading into the second chicane. Lucas seemed to be absolutely on fire in terms of pace. We saw the power moves that he was bringing out earlier in the session. In fact, if we look at the position changes, you can see both FVR cars have made up 3 positions. Kamensky has made up 8 in total, so massive shouts to him there. Had a very strong opening and has kept that momentum up for Thomas Senga Sim Racing likewise. Casper getting demoted this time by Scott Holmes. The 2 FVR cars, they're bringing some heat tonight. Looks like the medium runners might start to be feeling a little bit of trouble brewing. Those look like fairly quick and simple overtakes. Fiddler is going to be pulling the trigger, one of the first of the leaders, or lead cars anyway, to do so. So jumping onto the hard compounder tyre and making a swift transition back out to the racetrack. You can only hope that he's going to be at maybe even some of the traffic, but it looks like Casper and Zach Miles are going to be doing the same. Both coming in 10 laps on the medium compound, switching to fresh hards, most likely to take them to the end of the race. Raza in P3, smelling an opportunity here, quickly closing the gap to Claudio Diaz in P2, also on those mediums still, but can't quite close in to attack range. Now have a major distinctive gap, and we're starting to get a 2-party race forming. We have P15 and down, those who have taken a pit stop, although Wolfgram is a bit of an outlier here still. And we have those who remain out. And even then, Gabriel Moya and Lucas, 1.4 and 2.2 seconds. They are out of the DRS train. So that is going to be a problem that they are going to have to solve, and do so fast. Hopefully the pit cadence is going to be a tool that works in their favor. Question is, with some of the other leaders going in, who is going to make the call? Looks like everyone at that front set is going to remain out. Maybe Fiddler is the outlier here. Gio Baroni, though, is going to jump in with FST. Gabriel Moya going to be doing the same. I think the wiser choice, sidestepping the DRS issue, because you will be losing significant time, especially out here at Monza, by making that choice. If you have someone to chain with, to DRS with, it's a much easier game to play. I'm briefly closing in on Beisner. Can't quite make it stick. At this point, you have to play the race with a little bit more caution. You know that drivers are going to be dropping left and right, particularly those who you know who are on mediums. They're going to be dropping left and right as they all make the switch. You have to time your pit stops very precisely. Maximize the effect of your strategy. Those hard runners, they're going to keep those tires running for as long as they can allow. And most importantly, if they can sense that they are dropping out of the order, they're going to have to make that move to go in maybe a little bit earlier than they initially planned. Regardless, Diaz and Beisner, laps 12 on those mediums, now onto lap 13, making the call. Donoso staying out a lap longer, avoiding the double stack for his team, as Pascal Gil is going to jump in for an EB. And with that, the field, bar one, has all gone to the white wall tyre. Zach Miles actually getting the fastest lap of the session on the hard tyre with a 20.2. Shows that with a little bit of room, a little bit of space, and a healthy toe from your teammate, you're going to be just fine. In fact, we see a bit of a fight brewing in the second party of cars as Tecubi and Tom Wolfgram are going to go side by side. We have Beisner even getting involved, making it a three-way fight into the second chicane. The Ferrari is going to slice his way right down the middle. Beisner is going to push himself into P13. Tecubi being dropped down to the 14th spot as Wolfgram is going to be the lead on this one despite those aged hards. Scary thing is that Wolfgram's success is going to be limited. He will have to jump in for a second stop ultimately. That is going to be his downfall. We are going to have Donoso finally coming in as well. 12 laps on the mediums, now 13. Longest to do it on the initial stint. So now it then becomes a question of when the hard runners are going to jump in. Also, where is Donoso going to come out relative to the field? Has he timed this right? It's going to be close. Here comes Riedler. The two go up. Donoso is down. Donoso's in P3 here, and by a fairly significant time margin, even a little bit of a block up from Diaz. 1.4 seconds stands between Donoso and Riedler. What is going on here? Ultimately having to take the fall because you can't go in at the same time. That would be strategic. Well, that would be strategic self-sabotage. Donoso still having to take the brunt of that one, though. Lucas is going to get hit with 3 seconds of time penalties for track limits. Noah Razo and Loureiro are going to trade spots. Loureiro is in the proxy lead of the race now, with all the hard runners congregating towards the top 8. Lucas getting hit with that 3-second penalty. That is going to be a major detriment. That's going to be a kick in the teeth if I've ever seen one, as that has effectively nuked any chance of getting higher than a top 10. Zach Miles and Tom Wolfgram with a bit of slides. Ooh, as we go through Ascari, Wolfgram is off the track. In fact, sort of limping his way off of the grass, but it looks like no damage, no visual damage anyway. But what quite happened there? We saw him getting a little bit sideways with Miles as they went through Ascari. Maybe a fight gone wrong, maybe a rejoin gone wrong. I'm sure if those tyres were already grassed up time we got there. Riedler going for a brief closing of the gap on Diaz. Got Donoso breathing right down his neck though, and on the freshest hards no less. Well, that prime advantage isn't as much with the hards, designed to be much more consistent long-wearing tyre. Still going to be a little bit of deficit. Might feel certainly later when we get to the closing laps. Not going to waste any time in hunting down and going full throttle in. So is going to be continuing to push hard. Ryan for FCT is going to be into the pits, but Casper getting 3 seconds as well for track limits. Potentially sort of through Ascari, just a little bit too much on one of those apexes is all it takes sometimes. Deceptive, and usually the spot where drivers get those warnings stacked against them. Starting to see some of the hard runners now go onto the mediums. Ryan and Lucas both going to be making said move. A bit of a trade. Casper is going to be under some pressure. Zach Miles right behind him. Big question mark hovering over this race's future. And it all rests on the shoulders of those top 6 cars. Lucas being now down right at the back of the grid. A punishing fate for the driver, not only who's been making great advances, but got slammed with the 3-second penalty. So, giveth and taketh, one might argue. Either way, right down at the bottom. That's got to be his fight to recoup. Noso getting eerily close before backing off a little bit, allowing Vidler to go for an attack and at least a little bit of a lunge on Diaz. Raza, Ferrero, Kamensky all looking for the pit lane, all jumping into the medium compound. 3 drivers remain on those white walls from the start. Noso, Vidler, Diaz all looking to make an attack as well. Looks like Donoso is teeing something up here. Defensive run there for Vidler, and it's going to be almost 3 wide. He's got no choice but to duck to the right of Diaz, and that has compromised him. Now being boxed in, although a better exit from the Venturi Esports driver is going to allow him to hold on to the P2, despite the slightly messy chicane that they just experienced. That's going to only empower Vidler to go for another lunge later in this race, I feel, as we have just over 10 laps to go. Hey, this race has swept by somewhat quickly, it feels. Looks like things are getting a little bit rough, as that is Lucas. We cut to just see in the background. He's sliding across the track, grabbing gravel all over those tyres. Generally not looking too hot. Bit of a sparring back and forth with himself and Wolfgram. Raza's going to get hit with 3 seconds as well. So 3 drivers now being punished for track limits. Last position you want to be in. Beisner getting overtaken by Ryan on those prime mediums, looking to leverage that pace as quickly as possible. Raza also on those new tyres, but having hit that 3-second penalty, is going to have to work extra hard to make up for lost time. Still trying to tee up and look for chances to put on the offensive. With all drivers now having headed into the pit lane, especially those top 3, we now see the order in its true form. And Loureiro in P4 is the story I want to keep an eye on. P4, prime mediums, is looking teed up for a very successful swing at the podium. He just needs to play his cards right. He played that mid-pack run very well during the transition. Now it just needs to keep that momentum flowing. Less than 10 laps to go now. TRT being P1 and P3 with Venturi splitting the 2 on the podium. We could have some challenges for AMR and FCT quickly come in to crash the party. Got the cornering grip. You've got the lateral mechanical grip. Use it to your advantage. Looking like a good amount of speed compared to Donoso. He is going to go on the attack. Late swing, forcing him to go right to the inside, taking the risk and barely dipping 2 wheels into the grass. Still going on the defensive, and there is a safety car called. Tecubi is out of the session. Wolfgram is far down on those mediums, having taken his 2nd stop. I think a lap prematurely, but this could be a blessing in disguise. Full safety car being called. cutting that fight rudely short. And all of a sudden, everyone is now going to have to play nice, play ball, and potentially jump into the pits for a late, fresh set. Looks like we have got Marco and Lucas getting a fresh set of tyres, and by extension, a second lease of life in their race campaign. Passed by the safety car as it waits for the main field. And in sure due course, we'll be seeing the drivers make a judgment on whether they want to jump into the pits now or not. There could be a second set of mediums waiting for the hard runners. Have to wait and see how it all plays out. Regardless, it's been a very good race weekend for Diaz and Donoso. Exceptionally strong with that team. Atom Restech, of course, being the team to beat throughout this tier so far. Field has certainly tried. Lamar proving to be a bit of a formidable opponent in that regard. Have Lorero being a bit of a highlight, sort of sneaking up on this race. Now in P2, as Donoso has opted to stay out, while many others, including his teammate Diaz, have opted to go in pit. Vidla is doing the same, although going on to fresh hards rather than fresh mediums. With the current cadence of things, it's most likely that we are going to get back on green flag racing by lap 22, unless everyone quickly condenses into a singular field. Even then, it might not be enough. Lap 22, we're predicted to go green flag once again. Meantime, everyone's just going to catch up and bunch up. On keeping those tyres in the optimal window. And conserve a little bit of their tyre life. That's why we see some drivers sticking with those hards if they've only had them for a couple of laps. Or even the mediums if they got them for a couple of laps. Gives you a bit room to push them. Gives you a bit of leeway. Keeps more of their tyre life intact. Various different measures across the field. A couple of drivers weaving here and there just to keep them out of the brisk cold. The brakes is another one to worry about. Those silicon carbide brakes. Optimal operating temperature. In the hundreds of degrees. Drivers almost having to drag the brakes a little bit in order to keep them in an operating window viable. Now we're lining up for the most part. Most of the drivers have connected to the main queue. Wolfgram is an exception to this rule. But as we said, he's getting a little bit of a second chance here. Although he could have gained more time if he had pitted just a lap later when the safety car was called. Is now, regardless, going to be put back in the main stage, back in the main fight. Sure, ET8 are going to be very happy. That one. A really strong weekend as well for FCT. Team that we had previously reported, at least coming out of Spain, to be at the back of the championship order. So, to be at the back of that order, and yet stand here right now with a P3 and P8, I believe, if the napkin map serves correctly. That is a heck of a showing. That is certainly going to be a morale boost that I think this team deserves. Donoso controls the queue. See how he wants to play it as the safety car is in, returning to the pit. So does he go for the early jump? He goes for it, just coming out of Parabolica. gets a nice and smooth run, keeping Loureiro down by a couple of tenths, giving him a little bit of leeway as the race is now back underway. Green flag conditions, ignore that top timing tower. It's going to say caution for at least a little bit. But the field is reconnected and the field is reinvigorated. Donoso making a crucial mistake when it counts. He goes too hard, locks up the brakes. This is what we were talking about, keeping those brakes in the window. And that has not quite happened. Loureiro is going to seize the day, seize the opportunity, peels to the right. Donoso has to go defensive, feeling that crushing pressure right out of the gate from this final leg of the race here. Good recovery from the TRT driver, but Loureiro is not going to be waiting patiently. He's going to be taking that chance while it stares him in the face. Robotham on the back of Baroni. Ramirez losing the tail a little bit out of Lesmo 1. We have Diaz as well, who is going to be on the recovery, having got ahead of Vidler and stayed ahead of him throughout the safety car queue. Now needs to push to get back and reconnect with his teammate. He's going to go side by side through Ascari with Scott Holmes. Very risky play, but makes it work. Elegantly run as well from the TRT of Diaz. A little bit of defensive you see in the foreground from Donoso, as now we have Vidler making much of the same attack onto Scott Holmes, but not being as successful. Holmes with the inside line and still on the mediums, still in a good window. You're now going to have both VNT drivers putting some pressure on that McLaren. Where the driver's going to end up, we see up at the top, Loureiro not going for a sharp dive, but plenty of drivers are going to be chancing it as we briefly peek back, and you can see the train really capping in on itself now. Fellow teammate Ramirez in P8, trying to go for a chase on the Anibi driver in P7. Can't quite wing it, just not yet. Great defensive work from the field as well, might I add. You can even see Ramirez is going to be under pressure. There is Diaz pushing hard and up into P8. So Ramirez being down into P9 now. Driver making quick headway. I believe that is in a single position every single lap. That is some ruthless momentum coming through. Bit of defensive driving. You can see there's Zach Miles, Pascal Gill in the background. Guys continue to train forward at what is a fairly strong fight about to brew. Here is Dennis Kamensky in Tomasenga Sim Racing, trying to keep that proximity to Noah Raza and Kaposi for FCT. P3, P4, trying to close in a bit on the brakes as well. A little bit of a later run. A little bit shaky coming out of turn 2 there. Can't quite hold it on the rear axle. Very keen to get out of there and on good running. And Holmes making a swap. In fact, Holmes going down quite significantly there. Dropping a couple of places. It swings and makes a miss. Sam and Baroni still going at it with each other. Diaz is going to make an attack, but that's going to be Baroni out on the gravel. Lesmo 2, you just saw in the background. He makes a quick recovery, but that's not enough to save him from not only Diaz, but Ramirez and Vidler into P10, just holding it long enough to keep Beisner P11 at bay. Diaz is on a very aggressive run. In fact, just coming out of Ascari there, Vidler is going to get hit with 3 seconds. So the great campaign from the Ventari esports driver is going to get an abrupt ending. 3 seconds being slapped on by the stewards. That is going to be crushing. Side by side, just behind Beisner and Baroni, do jousting all the way through Sector 3 of the last lap, but it's going to rely a little bit on his teammates to go side by side, getting rear-ended, in fact, by Baroni as he's on the defense and holding the line. Having a little bit of coordination together, good to see. Almost protecting each other in a roundabout way. Here is Moyer on the defense for Baroni. Careful runs here, but both the FST cars looking at a peak, looking to try and destabilize Moyer in P11. But it's not going to quite take. Despite best efforts, it's just not going to take. Oso has actually been pushed down a peg as Loureiro getting a big run of speed. Going into Ascari and growing that gap to a quarter second here. Marco is going to be another driver to get hit with those 3 seconds. Raza 3 and 4. Donoso trying to get a bit of a narrower run. Dips into the grass even a little bit. Poor exit. The Tatum Restech driver. Loureiro looks to be the car to beat right now. But he's 9 laps in on the mediums. We saw drivers swap in from him as early as lap 10. So we know they're kind of out of their prime by now. 2 laps to go. Has Donoso's long play paid off? Has it? About to D peeking to the left. Kane trying to size up his opponent. 2 defensive strategy going from Raza as Kamensky is going to be right there. Robotam going on the attack on the inside with Lesmo 1 and a beautiful execution. Also going to open the door to Claudio Diaz, who gets himself up now into P6. Meteoric rise coming from the second TRT driver. Noso is continuing to fight hard against Loureiro for ultimately the lead and the win of this race here. We have got just over a lap to go, so it's final stretches, final chance. He's going to pull the trigger on a move. Got to do it now. Teeing up and almost a contact there going into Parabolica. That early break, I think, catching Donoso off guard, not giving him the move that he needed, the speed that he needed to really cap off this swing. But he's going all in. He's got DRS, he's got ERS, he's going to go full deploy. It's a game of chicken on the brakes here, and he's going to close up on the apex of turn 1. It's a very close run there, but Loureiro is demoted down to P2 as Donoso recaps the lead of this race, and it's going to be an electric fight to the finish. What has Loureiro got in the back pocket to try and counter? It could go for something into Ascari, but it's a high-risk move. Is he going to have enough momentum and enough room to make it happen? We go through Lesmo 1, we head into Lesmo 2. It's about half a second between the drivers. And we can see Casper, interestingly, going onto the soft tyre to end off his race. But Loureiro, try as he might, he's pumping it all in to try and close that gap. Gets within the quarter of a second, but it's just not enough. Donoso has this one fairly locked down. And a beautiful execution of the final move going into turn 1. The final lap. Some say it's 26 laps of preparation for 1 lap of final racing and strategy. Donoso has proved that tonight. An excellent final execute to make himself the winner of round 10 of SKG Pro Tier. Pro Series round 10 winner is going to, I'm sure, be absolutely chuffed for him and the team. Diaz jumping himself up to P5 by the end of it all, and you can see the standings order in full. It's Donoso, Loureiro, Camborsi in the top 3. Robotam and Diaz completing your top 5. Weisner, Raminguez, Raza, Moya and Miles complete your top 10 as beyond that point you get to the realms of drivers who were hit with those 3-second penalties and you start to see some of the demotions. Very well executed race by all involved, and in just a moment we will get that full stack of drivers and go through some of these. Here we go. You had our top 10. Donoso, Loureiro, Camborsi, top 3. And going further down, it's Robotam, Diaz, Weisner, Raminguez, Raza, Moya, and Miles. Going from P11 onwards then is Gio Baroni, Pascal Gil, Victor Vidler. I gotta say, it wasn't quite successful for those who took that late stop into the pits with the safety car. Didn't quite work out for them in this case, but still a very strong result for a few different teams. FCT, for example, is going to be walking away pretty happy with a P3 and a P8, even if it's not quite what they hoped for. Taking a little bit of that happy edge off. So Vidler, Wolfgram, Holmes, Lucas, Marco, and Casper, along with Kamensky. Tekubi getting a slap in the face with the DNF there. not able to bring it home tonight, but it was a heck of a showing. See, drivers leaving now. I'm sure that there are going to be plenty of discussions in the racers chat to break down a little bit of what happened, as these sessions tend to go. Of course, these are all provisional results, worth reminding, as the field will continue to chop and change. Stewards' decisions may have an effect on the final result, but as it stands now, a heck of a race. Oso coming out extremely strong, coming out on top there, and really proving itself as a continued force champion. TRT in away with another strong weekend, but other teams have something worth celebrating too. As far as it goes, though, for us, where we call it time, folks. Been an absolute pleasure to jump in for you last minute. Can only apologise once again for the slightly late start, but be sure to join us in the final weeks. Brazil and Abu Dhabi await to end this season off on a high, and you're going to have plenty to look forward to. I can tell you that much. We're looking at championships getting sealed for many different teams, potential drivers looking to walk away with some crowns, but for now, this is where we join us same time next week for the penultimate round of SKG Pro Series, and from myself and the Driveline team, have a great night, enjoy your day or your evening wherever you are in the world, and goodbye.